Number 22. The Chingi de Bemaraha. In western Madagascar, there is a forest that is not made of wood, it is made of stone. The Malagasy people named it Chingi, a word that means the place where you cannot walk barefoot, and they were being generous. Limestone blades up to 200 feet tall stand packed together in a gray labyrinth, their edges honed by millions of years of rain into something closer to a field of knives than a landscape. The reserve covers nearly 600 square kilometers. Its outer edges have been mapped, photographed, and named a World Heritage Site. Its core has not, because the core actively refuses people. Picture trying to cross a city where every building is a vertical razor and every street is a crack too narrow for your shoulders. The rock cuts through climbing rope, it shreds boots, it opens skin. Helicopters cannot land among the spires. Drones lose their signal in the deep slots between them. And in those slots, in canyons and caves that no aircraft can see into, separate worlds have grown. Lemurs that exist nowhere else leap between the blades. Plants rooted in tiny pockets of soil between the needles have never been classified. It is one of the richest biological vaults on the planet, locked behind a wall that opens for almost no one. In 2014, a team using specialized gear forced its way into a previously unentered canyon, and, in a matter of days, documented 3 species new to science and water sources on no map. Then their equipment failed and they retreated. They had scratched a single corridor of an entire hidden country. How many species live between the stones has never even been estimated. The deepest canyons stay unexplored, not because we choose to leave them in peace, but because the planet will not let us in. If the Tsingy holds undiscovered life, why not build the tools to reach it? If the outer ring is safe, why has the center never been crossed? And if a landscape on Earth can defeat every human attempt to enter it, what does that say about our certainty that we have conquered this world? The next place did not defeat us. We simply never noticed it was there. Number 12. Snake Island. About 33 kilometers off the coast of Sao Paulo, Brazil, there is an island the government forbids you to visit, and for once the prohibition is not bureaucracy or neglect, it is mercy, in both directions. Ilha da Queimada Grande, known to the world as Snake Island, is roughly 100 acres of rock and forest, and it is the only place on Earth where the golden lancehead viper lives. When the seas rose at the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago, a population of snakes was stranded on this rising scrap of land, cut off from the mainland, and they evolved alone into something the mainland never produced. With no ground prey left, the snakes climbed and learned to hunt the migrating birds that stop on the island to rest. A snake that bites a bird cannot follow it if it flies away. So the lancehead evolved a venom of terrible speed, by some measures several times more potent than its mainland cousins, strong enough to kill quickly and, the local stories say, to rot human flesh around a bite. And there are a great many of them. Estimates of the population vary, but the density is high enough that the legends speak of one snake for every stretch of ground you might think to put a foot. The Brazilian Navy keeps the island closed. The only people allowed ashore are a handful of vetted scientists, accompanied by a doctor. Here, the Unexplored is not a failure of will. It is a place where the planet built something so dangerous that staying away is the sane response, and where the species is so rare and fragile that our presence would threaten it as surely as it threatens us. Both things are true at once. And notice what that does to every other place on this list. When the reason for sealing somewhere is honest, you can see it clearly. Snake Island is sealed for a reason anyone can understand. So when the reasons given for the others start to wobble, when protection turns out to also mean ignorance, you will feel the difference. The next place is not kept from us by venom, and it is not small. It is a swamp larger than England, and we only learned its true size a few years ago. Number 10. The Foja Mountains. In the province of Papua, on the Indonesian side of the island of New Guinea, a range of mist-covered mountains rises out of one of the least disturbed forests left on Earth. In late 2005, a team from Conservation International, led by the biologist Bruce Beeler, was set down by helicopter into the Foja Mountains, into hundreds of thousands of hectares of old-growth forest that, by every sign they could find, no human had ever entered. There were no trails, no fire pits, no cut stumps. The local people who owned the land told them that even they had never gone that far in. 10 minutes into the trip, Beeler saw a bird he did not recognize and realized it was a species new to science. It was that kind of place. He compared it to stepping through a time warp. Over the following weeks, the team found new species the way the rest of us find loose change. More than 20 new frogs, A honey-eater, the first new bird described from the island of New Guinea in over 60 years. A golden-mantled tree kangaroo thought to be nearly gone. Egg-laying mammals so unbothered by humans that the scientists could simply pick them up and carry them back to camp, because nothing in their evolutionary memory had taught them to fear a person. One scientist called it as close to the Garden of Eden as you will find on Earth. That is what an unexplored place actually looks like when you finally walk into it. Not empty, overflowing. So full of the undiscovered that the problem is not finding new life, but recording it fast enough. And the expedition only touched a fraction of the range. The interior is still, in the deepest sense, unentered. If a forest this rich was sitting unexplored within a helicopter ride of an airport, what else is hiding in the folds of New Guinea? If new species appear the moment we arrive, how much have we never met? And if there is still a place on Earth where the animals do not know to be afraid of us, how much of the planet have we honestly explored? The next place took the same idea and sealed it inside a wall of stone, with no way in at all. Number 9. Mount Liko. Not far from Mount Mabu, in the same forgotten highlands of northern Mozambique, stands a mountain that guards its secret better than almost anywhere on Earth. Mount Liko is an old volcanic core, and at its top sits a rainforest cradled inside the crater, surrounded on every side by a sheer rock wall around 125 meters high. For centuries, possibly far longer, that wall did what no law and no government could. It kept everyone out. The forest on top grew with no logging, no hunting, no human interference of any kind, because there was simply no way to climb up to it. The same biologist who spotted Mabu on a screen, Julian Bayliss, found Liko the same way, scanning satellite images, and when he saw the ring of cliffs enclosing a disk of untouched green, he understood what it had to be, a sealed laboratory of life. It took years to assemble a team that could reach it. In 2018, climbers finally went up the vertical rock face, and for the first time, human beings stood in a forest that had been closed off above the plains for an unknown span of centuries. They found what sealed places always hold: new species, undisturbed soil, a pristine record of what a forest is when people have never been allowed to touch it. Think about how rare that is. Almost everywhere humans can reach, we have already changed. Liko is one of the last benchmarks, a control sample for an entire planet. A small green island that shows what the world looks like with us subtracted. And it survived for one reason only, because a wall happened to be too tall. If the only thing that preserved this forest was an accident of geology, what does that say about everywhere a wall did not happen to stand? If we needed climbers and years of planning just to look inside one crater, how many sealed craters have we never looked into? And if the last untouched places survive only where we physically cannot go, what have we done to everywhere else? The next place is forbidden by something taller than any cliff. By a god, on a mountain 4 faiths agree no one should ever climb. Number 8. Mount Kailash. In the far west of Tibet stands a mountain that more than 1 billion people consider sacred, and that not a single climber in recorded history has ever summited. Mount Kailash rises over 6,000 meters in near-perfect symmetry, a dark pyramid streaked with horizontal bands of snow, standing apart from any range, unmistakable from a great distance. For Hindus, it is the home of a god. For Buddhists, for Jains, for the followers of the ancient Bon tradition, it is the spiritual center of the world, an axis around which existence itself is arranged. Pilgrims walk the long circuit around its base. No one walks up. The mountain is not unclimbable in the way the highest peaks are. It is lower than Everest, lower than the great killers of the Himalaya. Expeditions have considered it. In one well-known account, a famous mountaineer was reportedly offered permission to climb it and turned the offer down, saying that some places should be left untouched, that to stand on that summit would be to put your foot on the head of a god. The Chinese authorities have left the mountain closed to climbing, and so the summit of Kailash remains, like Gangkhar Puensum, a piece of high ground that human beings have looked at for thousands of years and never stood upon. And here the reason for the blank space on the map is not danger, and not neglect, and not even law in the ordinary sense. It is reverence. An entire region of the planet has agreed, across religions that agree on almost nothing else, that this one place will remain unexplored on purpose, forever, as an act of respect. It is worth sitting with that because it is the opposite of every other entry. We are not failing to reach Kailash, we are choosing, deliberately and across cultures, not to. If a summit can stay unclimbed for millennia because people simply decide it should, what does that reveal about all the summits we did climb? Is the unexplored always a failure? Or is it sometimes a choice? And if some places are left blank out of awe, How do we tell those apart from the ones left blank out of indifference? The next place no one reveres. It is simply too poisonous to breathe. Number 7. Mobile Cave. In southeastern Romania, sealed beneath limestone, lies a cave that was cut off from the surface of the Earth roughly 5.5 million years ago and stayed sealed until an accident in 1986 when workers testing ground for a power plant broke through its ceiling and let the first daylight in. What they had opened was not really a cave, it was a separate planet, running on different rules, in the dark, beneath their feet the entire time. The air inside Mobile is poison to a human being. It carries less than half the oxygen of surface air and is thick with hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide, so no one enters without breathing equipment and strict safety protocols. There is no light, and so there is no photosynthesis. Nothing in this ecosystem eats sunlight. Instead, at its base, bacteria pull energy straight out of chemical reactions in the rock and water, a process called chemosynthesis, and an entire food web is built on top of that chemistry. More than 30 species live in Mobile that exist nowhere else on Earth. Spiders, water scorpions, leeches, and other animals, almost all of them blind, almost all of them colorless, all of them shaped by 5.5 million years of evolution, with no contact whatsoever with the outside world. This is the closest thing we have to a second, independent trial run of life on our own planet. Life that started from a shared origin and then ran in total isolation, in conditions that would kill anything from the surface, for longer than our species has existed. And only a handful of human beings have ever been allowed inside, because exposing it to our microbes could destroy the very thing that makes it precious. The full cave has never been mapped. Many of its species have never been formally described. If Mobile is an irreplaceable record of how life adapts, why is the research kept so small? If contamination is the danger, why not build sterile ways to watch it? And if life can run a completely separate experiment for 5.5 million years inside a poisoned cave, how many similar experiments are sealed in caves we have not broken into yet? The next sealed world is far larger, far older, and buried under more than 2 miles of ice. Number 6. Lake Vostok. Beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet, under more than 2 miles of frozen water, lies a lake the size of Lake Ontario that has been sealed away from the surface of the planet for an estimated 15 million years. Lake Vostok is liquid, not ice, kept from freezing by the crushing weight of the ice above it and a trickle of heat from the rock below. Whatever lives in its water has been isolated for longer than our species has existed, longer than most modern mammals, through every ice age that reshaped the world above. It was suspected in the 1970s, confirmed by radar in the early 1990s, and first reached by drilling only in 2012. The numbers are staggering on their own. The lake stretches around 250 kilometers long. Its water has not seen sunlight in 15 million years. When Russian scientists, after 2 decades of drilling, finally punched through to its surface, they pulled up samples that froze in the borehole as they rose, and in them they found signs of microbial life, organisms shaped by cold, darkness, and pressure unlike anything on the surface. A sealed sea with its own life, never touched until the present decade. But there is a shadow over the discovery, and it is our own. To keep the borehole open, the drilling used a fluid of kerosene and other chemicals, and critics warned that it could have leaked into the lake, contaminating in a single moment a world that had been pure for 15 million years. So we may have found ancient life, or we may have found our own contamination staring back at us, and we cannot yet be sure which. Since 2012, no clean expedition has returned to settle it. The sterile probes that could were designed and discussed and never funded. This is the lake that may hold answers about whether life can survive beneath the ice of distant moons, and we reached into it once, possibly fouled it, and walked away. If Vostok holds life isolated for millions of years, why not make clean exploration a priority? If the lake had been sealed since before our ancestors stood upright, why was our first touch a chemical one? And if the answer to whether we are alone in the solar system might lie under our own ice, why is no one going back? Some sealed worlds we are at least allowed to study. The next one we are forbidden to set foot on purpose, by law. Number 5. Surtsey. On the 14th of November 1963, the sea south of Iceland began to boil, and a volcano that had been hidden underwater broke the surface and started building an island in front of human eyes. The eruptions continued until 1967, and when they stopped, there was a brand new piece of land where there had been only ocean. They named it Surtsey, after a fire giant from Norse myth. And then the scientists of Iceland did something almost no one ever does with a new place. They sealed it. From the beginning, Surtsey was declared off-limits to everyone but a small number of researchers, and it has stayed that way ever since. The reason is the rarest opportunity in all of biology. Surtsey is a clean page, a sterile island born in living memory, where scientists can watch, from the very first day, how life arrives on bare ground. The first seeds that drift in on the waves. The first molds, the first insects carried by wind, the first gull that lands, and by nesting fertilizes the soil that lets a plant take hold. Every footprint a human leaves would smuggle in seeds and spores and ruin the experiment. So almost no one is allowed to walk there. The island is being deliberately left unexplored, not out of fear and not out of neglect, but because its scientific value depends entirely on our absence. And that is the second time on this list the pattern has flipped. Surtsey, like Snake Island, is a place where staying away is the honest, defensible choice, and where you can see exactly why. Which is precisely why it matters here, near the end. It gives you a clean standard to hold the others against. When a place is kept blank for a real reason, the reason is obvious and the same in every direction. So when you go back over this list, over the trench with its 3 visitors and its missing funding, over the islands sealed in ways that also happen to keep them unknown, you can ask, honestly, which blanks are like Surtsey and which are only dressed up to look like it? If we can leave one island untouched on purpose and explain it in a sentence, why are the other blanks so much harder to explain? The next place is not small and not new. It is the largest single cave on Earth, and we have barely begun to see the end of it. Number 4. Son Doong. On the 10th of December, 1990, a Vietnamese man named Ho Con was sheltering from a storm in the jungle of central Vietnam when he felt cold wind pouring out of a hole in the ground and heard a river roaring somewhere far below. He was standing at the entrance to the largest cave passage in the world, and he did not know it, and when he walked home, the jungle swallowed the entrance so completely that it took him 18 years to find it again. In 2009, he finally led a team from the British Cave Research Association, under the caver Howard Limbard, back to the hole, and a caver named Peter McNabb became the first human to step inside Son Doong. The scale is almost impossible to hold in the mind. The main passage runs for miles, and in places it rises around 200 meters high and over 100 meters wide. A skyscraper of 40 stories could stand inside it. A Boeing 747 could fly down its largest chamber without touching the walls with its wings. The Great Pyramid of Giza would fit inside with room to spare. The measured volume is around 38.5 million cubic meters, roughly 5 times larger than the cave that held the record before it, and it has its own weather. Where the ceiling has collapsed, sunlight pours down in vast shafts, and entire jungles grow on the cave floor, with clouds forming under the stone roof and drifting through the dark. And we still have not seen all of it. The first expedition was stopped cold by a wall of flowstone over 60 meters tall, which the team named the Great Wall of Vietnam, and only on a later trip did they climb it and find the far exit. Years after that, divers tried to follow the underground river deeper and ran out of air before they reached the end, with passages still continuing down into water no one has mapped. The largest cave on Earth was found by accident, by one man sheltering from rain, and most of its connected system is still unexplored. If avoid this enormous hit until 1990, how many comparable ones are still hidden? If the largest cave we know was found by luck, how many were found by no one? And if there are passages here that human beings still cannot follow, how can we say we have mapped the inside of our own planet? The last 3 are different from everything before them because no one will ever walk into them at all. The first is a mountain range that no eye has ever seen. Number 3. The Gamburtsev Mountains. In 1958, a Soviet expedition crossing the most remote interior of East Antarctica ran seismic surveys through the ice beneath their sleds, and the readings came back impossible. There were mountains down there, not hills. A full mountain range, the size of the European Alps, with peaks and valleys and alpine ridges, buried under as much as 3 to 4 kilometers of solid ice in the dead center of the most stable, ancient part of the continent, where the land was supposed to be flat and worn down to nothing. They named the buried range the Gamburtsev Mountains, after a Soviet geophysicist, and then, because the place is one of the hardest to reach on the planet, the world essentially left the mystery alone for 50 years. It was only during the International Polar Year, around 2008 and 2009, that a team from 7 nations flew aircraft loaded with ice-penetrating radar and gravity meters back and forth across the region, finally building a detailed picture of the range hidden below. A geophysicist on the project called it an absolute mystery in every respect. The mountains have sharp, youthful, alpine peaks, the kind that erosion should have ground flat over hundreds of millions of years, and yet there they stand, preserved, because the very ice sheet that hides them also froze them in place. This buried range is very likely the birthplace of the largest ice sheet on Earth, the seed crystal from which all that ice first grew. And here is the part that reorganizes everything. No human being has ever seen the Gamburtsev Mountains. No one ever will, not their peaks, not their valleys, not a single ridge, because they are sealed beneath kilometers of ice in a place colder and more remote than almost anywhere on the planet. We know they are there entirely through radar and gravity, through machines reading a shape we cannot reach. An entire mountain range, the size of the Alps, mapped without a single person ever laying eyes on it. We did not run out of mountains to discover. We found a whole range and accepted that it will stay forever in the dark. The next place is the same kind of unreachable, and it was found, astonishingly, only in this century. Number 2. The Greenland Mega Canyon. In 2013, a team led by Jonathan Bamber at the University of Bristol was assembling decades of radar data, much of it from a NASA mission that had flown back and forth across Greenland, firing radio waves through the ice to read the bedrock beneath. As they stitched the surveys together, a shape emerged that no one had ever seen, because no one had ever combined the data this way. Running from near the center of Greenland all the way to the northern coast was a canyon. A real canyon, with the V-shaped walls and meandering path of an ancient river, at least 750 kilometers long, in places 800 meters deep, hidden beneath up to 2 kilometers of ice. It is longer than the Grand Canyon of Arizona and on a similar scale in depth, and it had been sitting under the ice of Greenland for millions of years, carved by rivers that flowed before the ice sheet ever existed, completely unknown until someone looked at old data in a new way. The scientist who led the work put it plainly. With street-level maps of cities and digital atlases of nearly everything, he said, one might assume the surface of the Earth has been fully explored and mapped. It has not. A canyon the length of a country was discovered, in the 21st century, beneath one of the most studied ice sheets on the planet, by people sitting at computers, and like the buried mountains, no human will ever stand in it. There is no expedition that reaches the floor of a canyon under 2 kilometers of ice. We know its length, its depth, its winding course, and we know that human feet will never touch a meter of it. The last great river valley discovered on Earth is a place we found and can never visit. Sit with what that means about the map. The blank spaces are not all at the edges anymore. Some of them are enormous and right beneath the most familiar ice on the planet, and we are only now realizing they are there. If a canyon this size hid under Greenland until 2013, what is still hidden under Antarctica, under the oceans, under our feet? Which brings us to the last one. The largest unexplored place on Earth. And it is not in Greenland or Antarctica or the bottom of the sea. It is directly below you, right now. Number 1. The world beneath your feet. In December of 2018, after 10 years of work, a collaboration of more than 1,000 scientists from over 50 countries, called the Deep Carbon Observatory, announced what they had found by drilling into the seafloor and down into mines and boreholes kilometers deep into the continents. There is a biosphere inside the Earth. Not a few hardy microbes clinging to life, but a vast, living world in the rock beneath the surface, reaching kilometers down, holding an estimated 15 to 23 billion tons of carbon in living things. That is hundreds of times the carbon held in every human being alive. By volume, this deep realm is nearly twice the size of all the oceans combined. They called the organisms intraterrestrials, and they called the deep Earth a subterranean Galapagos, because the life down there is strange, ancient, and overwhelmingly undiscovered. Some of these organisms live so slowly that a single generation may pass over thousands of years, barely alive by any standard we are used to, persisting in the dark and the heat and the crushing pressure, since long before there were forests or animals on the surface. The scientists estimate that millions of species are down there, almost none of them named, almost none of them seen. And the boundary of this world is not even known. We do not yet know how deep life goes, only that every time we drill, we find it still there. So here, at the end, is where all of this has been pointing. We talk about the unexplored as if it were far away, at the bottom of a trench, on top of a cliff, behind a wall of arrows or a wall of ice. But the single largest unexplored environment on the planet is not distant at all. It is underneath the chair you are sitting in. Below the floor, below the foundations, below the soil, the rock is alive, and it is teeming, and we have met almost none of it. Every other place on this list is out there, somewhere you would have to travel. This one, you are already on top of. You have been on top of it your entire life. We did not run out of planet to explore. We told ourselves the map was finished, and it was never finished. The deepest sea has been visited by 3 people. A mountain range the size of the Alps will never be seen by any eye. A canyon longer than the Grand Canyon was found on a computer and will never be walked. Forests hid until someone scrolled past them from orbit. Peoples vanish before we learn their names. And a living world hundreds of times our own mass waits in the dark a few meters below your feet. The unexplored never left. It simply stopped being somewhere we were willing to go. And the strangest discovery on this entire list is not any single place. It is that we decided, quietly and without ever quite admitting it, to stop looking, while standing directly on top of the largest unknown of all. If you want to keep looking, click the video on screen now and subscribe.